Okay. Good evening, everybody. As a preliminary matter, I am Tina Burgos, member of the Needham Human Rights Committee, and I will be chairing this meeting. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Cynthia.
Here.
Jen.
She's having technical difficulties, but is joining.
Okay. Carrie.
Here.
Amelia.
Here.
Belinda. Is Belinda on?
She sends her regrets. She's at the Take Back the Night event.
Yeah, it's happening now.
Renaz.
Here.
Vin.
Here.
Bud.
Here.
Marlene is not here tonight. Julie. Emmy.
Here.
Katie.
Here.
And I am here. This open meeting of the Needham Human Rights Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 20th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting is a webinar and will allow the public to comment. For this meeting, the Needham Human Rights Committee is convening by Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, I will afford public comment as follows. I will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once I have a list of all public commentators, I will call on each by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. We have
Jen has
Nicole.
Jen has joined us, by the way, Tina.
Hi, Jen. Katie is
Tina, I have minutes this month. I didn't see it on the agenda, and I'm wondering if this is the month that Marlene had asked me to do.
I
this.
Yes,
think it
this is
is
the month.
because I
Marlene's not
had
here
taken
today.
your old one.
Gotcha. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Sorry. Is Nicole on tonight already?
She is.
Okay, so I'm going to switch the agenda around a little bit because Nicole Argo is going to speak and I don't want her to have to slog through the meeting. Do we have anybody else for public participation?
No.
Okay. So Nicole, thank you for joining us, Nicole. We're bumping down you guys to the, where is it? Did I even put it on here? The Needham Resilience Network. So I believe Nicole presented to NDI, is that correct? Amelia and Cynthia, a couple of days ago, and because a few of us are involved with the network, and it's just something that we should know about in general because it is an important endeavor. I asked Nicole to join us tonight to talk to us about the network and where things currently stand, as this has been a work in progress for both you and Beth, I know, for a while. So welcome, Nicole, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tina. And it would never be a slog to sit through the meeting. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope to learn a lot. I know that some of you are familiar with the idea of this Needham Resilience Network, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about the basic goals and structure of it, and then just give you our latest update of where we're at. And really looking forward to answering any questions that folks have as well. So the temporary name is the Needham Resilience Network, and the network itself will vote on a name in a few months, or maybe even in a couple months. But in general, its goal is to coalesce around shared values, meaning primarily the well-being of each and every community member here in Needham. And the way that we're thinking of that well-being in this context is social, that anybody living here feels supported, welcomed in an environment of equity and possibility, free from identity-based discrimination, mistreatment, or harm. So what we are doing based on the principles and best practices from international literatures is building a whole of society network. What does that mean? It's big words, right? It's basically a network of people who are liaisons or representatives of all the major stakeholders in town, whether they are formal or informal. So that would include identity groups, BIPOC, LGBTQIA, different faiths, disabilities, age, etc., whether they're organized or not. And importantly, traditionally marginalized groups are at the center of assessing risks and realities in Needham and thinking about interventions or community programming. So in terms of concrete goals, this is a group where our focus will be to build a relationship and communications infrastructure. So by relationships, I mean that we want individuals to get to know each other, individuals who may not necessarily come into contact with each other otherwise. And we want to develop a warmth and a trust across groups. In terms of communications infrastructure, we want to develop a shared knowledge, enabling groups to synergize or complement or amplify each other's work. Just be aware of who's doing what, why, how, when. Are there ways to work together? Can we at least, if we're not going to work together, do we understand someone else's perspective and can we respect it? So this is a network of networks. Everybody that we are inviting is related to a subgroup of people. It's a table of multipliers, and each member of the network will bring information or concerns or excitement from their subnetwork, from the organization or the group of people that they are related to. And they're going to relay the network happenings back to that group, whether that be via Facebook or an e-list, et cetera. And part of this will be to align around a shared understanding of racism and anti-racism, local risks of discrimination, hate, or targeted violence in order to prevent it and to respond to it if and when it happens. This will also create a process and a forum for difficult discussions. There's no way that we can be talking about these issues and not sometimes come upon hard emotions or experiences or differences of opinion. But in today's world, we don't always have the tools or the processes or space to handle that well. So there will be a training and a kind of network table agreement. Here's how we communicate around these issues to build respectful relationships. And then another concrete goal of the first year will be to prepare response communications or event templates for effectively responding if things occur that harm any specific group in town. There's a lot more to be said on that. I won't go into here, but there are a set of best practices, including first going to the individuals or groups that have been targeted or affected and asking what they want. In terms of prevention, the network is meant to give voice and ownership to some like adjunct social cohesion projects. So it could be that members of the network are doing things to promote social cohesion or inclusion or social contact across difference, and the network can easily support that. And it might be that the network itself decides to organize something at some point. Additionally, and I would love to hear from the HRC about this, the network is very interested in building a threat assessment team. We have to come up with a better term for that. But really, it might be something that would partner with the Human Rights Committee and the Needham Police Department in terms of understanding where people have been or are being targeted, and if there are individuals who are at risk of promulgating hate or harm, if there are ways that we can help to intervene informally. If there are faith leaders or employment offices or other people related to the network that can support somebody who's at risk of going down a more extreme path. There's a lot of research and literature and lessons learned about how to do this that we have access to. Lastly, the goal of this network after 2 years is to socialize what we've learned and to be a model for, scaling this up around the country. There's a lot of reasons to believe that local groups of people who come together according to best practices like this might be able to solve some of their local problems in ways that are hard to do in an America that's pretty segregated, facing all the challenges it's facing. So on year 3, we'll be working on an off-the-shelf guide for local resilience that can be utilized in communities across America. And Needham really is the home and the first pilot for this. So in terms of our update in the last few months, we have hired a program manager who is wonderful. Her name is Jennifer James. And she comes with a lot of experience in similar backgrounds. We have confirmed 26 participants in the network, liaisoning to all these different identity and stakeholder groups in town. There's 3 to 4 more to be confirmed this week. We are going to keep the number at 30 or below in order to facilitate for relationship building. We'll start with our first meeting on Thursday, March 3rd. And then there will be monthly meetings thereafter. We were fortunate and grateful to receive a $25,000 per year grant for 3 years from the Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital here in Needham and the Crimson Lion Foundation, Family Foundation. These funds in this first year will be completely dedicated to the salary for a program manager. It's 5 to 10 hours a week, so it's not a ton of time, but it should help immensely. A community-wide survey that will establish a baseline from which we can compare impact on the community over time, and a survey software that allows us to do smaller surveys with participants or the people they represent in the network every 6 months or so. So I think that's a lot of information to throw at you, but if it generates any questions, I would love to answer them.
Nicole, one of the reasons you and I started talking was because we were looking for an ally in our work with developing this discrimination complaint process. We are still in the process of fleshing that out and really hammering down the details before we can formally present to the select board and get sign off on that. I know there have been some concerns from members of HRC about reaching beyond the resources that we have within our group. And for various reasons, we do have to do that given we are an organization of the town government. But I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to where you see the Resilience Network working with us in helping to develop this process, and where you feel like the network is going to be most valuable in helping us sort through some of the issues that we may not be able to tackle on our own.
Yeah, absolutely. My only preface is going to be this. When I put together a very large grant last summer, I was in the thick of this kind of thinking. It was a grant for violence prevention, and there is so much literature and knowledge about best practices in this regard. And that really buttressed our thinking of like how this design might look. In the last few months, I have been wholly dedicated to one-on-one conversations and thinking through other parts of the network. So my brain is going to be digging into older archives. But let me start, and then if it's helpful at a later point to bring the knowledge to bear that I was able to collect a while back on this for further discussion, I'm happy to do that. But long story short, violence prevention across the United States, as we know, targeted violence has increased everywhere, and it includes school shootings to hate crimes, et cetera. And we've learned that securitized approaches, so just focusing all the investment and effort into law enforcement is not so helpful with prevention. It's helpful in other ways, but when it comes to preventing, what we have found, and there's a lot of consensus around this, is that working closely with informal community leaders to identify folks who are at risk and to intervene in supportive and anonymous and helpful ways, so that this is the most effective thing that can be done. So what do I mean by that? I come from a world, I look at trajectories towards political violence. I've looked at it all around the world, only more recently in the United States, but we know there are risk factors and protective factors for any person who's leaning towards hate or targeted violence of any kind, right? To get you to that place where you're lashing out and you're blaming someone. And risk factors include things like feeling isolated, trauma, being bullied, losing status, losing job, losing relationships, all sorts of like general mental health risk factors, as well as, of course, who you're associated with and things like this. Protective factors are support systems, being a part of something, feeling belonging, feeling like you have possibility. And so one thing that they have learned in this violence prevention work is that if you're very well connected in a community and you identify somebody who is at risk, who has said things or done things that are potentially harmful or lean towards the possibility of harm, and you can intervene before something goes too far via relationships, via faith leaders, via other friends or an employment network, et cetera, and in a way that is confidential and caring about the person, it goes a long way to stopping anything of further harm from happening. So when we heard about the complaint line and its partnership with the NPD, our thought, and this is a model that we didn't come up with, it's actually out there. It's being socialized and scaled around the country, was how might this network be able to support any case where we have a sense of who promulgated a harm, especially if it's not a very grand harm, like if it's not a crime yet, and if it hasn't, if the police aren't investigating it. So if there is a community event where there's reason to believe that a person would benefit from support, so you're focused on the victims or recipients of discrimination or hate. And this would be saying, if we can identify who the person is who might have caused it and find a way in informally or through other community venues to support anything that would happen on the law enforcement side, et cetera, that can serve a major violence prevention role. So that is I guess that's a really long answer. That's what happens when you don't come prepared. But that's sort of the rationale and background for what we're calling the threat assessment team. And we took this name from federal and national projects that have provided models and sort of how-to trainings for this. But that is basically the model for it. And then all the little tiny questions like about protocol and process and training and who's involved at what point, those are the things that, you know, we haven't really talked about in a long while. And I know that the HRC has been really working hard on figuring out your process, which I think is the first step. And then we would love to come in if this is of interest. I think we would really like to think about how to partner and how to do so effectively and safely.
Bud?
Trying to unmute. Okay, Bud Schramm. I have a question regarding, your presentation. Nothing was mentioned about any education element regarding hate. Where does hate come from? People get educated, and if they're educated, they may be less likely to have hate in their body. But could you address that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the network itself, one part of these meetings will be sort of mini sessions, sort of learnings and best practices from the academic or practitioner literature on various topics. And those topics include social identity and intergroup relations. Some of the things, if anybody here was at the workshop a year ago, so we'll do some recap of that, but then go into other topics as well. So bottom line, there is an education component for the network participants, all of whom are leaders or hubs within networks in Needham. So we hope and expect that those learnings will be discussed in those other networks. And in terms of hate, we're in an interesting place right now where we're not finding, you find growing levels of anxiety and outgroup hate across education levels, right? In the United States right now. So we have partisan identities that make it very hard in study after study for people to kind of put themselves in the shoes or the mind of someone from a different partisan status. We see this also with race. We see this with socioeconomic status. So we are aware that there are a lot of barriers and education isn't always enough. What we do know is that social norms play a huge role in people's jump to like blaming others or having negative attitudes towards others, or even feeling like they could approach others, not being afraid of others. So part of the network's raison d'etre is to become a social norm. That in Needham, we work together across difference and we know each other and we are friends across difference and we have shared values. So just modeling that already in study and experiment after study and experiment is shown to have a big impact. But of course, there will be the education piece, and we have grants written that are out right now to get funding for what we're calling right now an upstander training, which would take the key pieces of several of these education themes, put it all into a training that could be taken to the high school and the youth, anybody in the network who wants it. So town officials, any of the identity or civic groups, et cetera. And this we would like to make available when the program gets scaled throughout the country. So yes, we're really big into we believe in education. And it is part of what we're looking to do with prevention. And we don't yet have the funding to do that training, but it's something we want to do beyond the network. Did that answer the question?
Does anybody else have any other questions for Nicole or comments?
I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for coming tonight and presenting this. And you just have an incredible way of speaking, and it's just a pleasure to hear you talk about this. And I'm just happy that you came. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you, Carrie.
Cynthia.
I deeply agree with what Carrie says, and this is so dear to our hearts because several years ago, the Human Rights Committee was interested in following up with how we could respond, or how we could help the community respond to acts of violence and to build a more inclusive community. Paying with equity for everyone is, part of the main goals of the Human Rights Committee. And it's just so wonderful to see over the years. We started with a small group with Marlene and Amelia and I, and then Jen and lots of other people came, and then Nicole came to town, and suddenly we had a whole nother perspective from her as a person and from all the work she's done. And just so grateful that you decided to be part of our community and to go so deeply into this and give a great deal of your own time and perspective. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. I want to call a spade here. The work that you and Amelia and Jen and the Human Rights Committee did, I mean, wherever we get in life, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And I don't think that this network would even be a thought right now if all of that work hadn't been done. And certainly even the workshop a year ago wouldn't have been sponsored. I mean, thank you for bringing all of the pieces together. I see this as very much having originated with the Human Rights Committee and with David Summergrad, and then with the support of the town.
Anyone else? So Nicole, as we continue to work through our process, I think it would make sense for us to circle back again and to help us sort of finalize and put this in place. We do understand that this is an evolving process, so we are not in any way, shape, or form dedicated to one outcome. I think the thought currently is, particularly with this discrimination complaint process, we get to the point where we feel like it's solid enough to launch. We see how it goes for 12 months, and we tweak along the way according to how things unfold. So, but obviously with your support, with Beth's support, and with the network support, I think we'll really be able to come up with something that we are going to be proud of.
I believe that too. Can't wait to see how it comes out.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking your time tonight to present. This was great.
Very good. All right. Good luck, everyone. Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Thank you, Nicole. Okay, I'm going to bump us back up to, just quickly so I don't forget, because I have a tendency to do that. Approval of the minutes from January 20th. I received 1 or 2 comments, but does anybody have anything else to amend before we vote on the minutes? No? Okay. So a motion to approve the minutes from January 20th. In a second. No, anyone? Second the motion. Thank you. Cynthia,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Carrie.
I wasn't here.
Okay. Amelia,
Yes.
Renaz,
Yes.
Finn,
Yes.
Bud, were you here? No.
Abstain.
Yeah. Julie,
Yes.
Emmy,
Yeah.
Okay, great. Minutes from January 20th, 2022 have been approved. Let's move on to the community education event. Jen, Bud and I have been speaking with various folks to develop this. One recent development is that is it the Needham Center for Adult Education? Is that what that stands for?
I think it's community education.
Okay, so coincidentally, they are launching a program on this exact topic. So Jen and I met with the woman who is from that organization, just to sort of hash out ideas and figure out, where we could align in efforts. Jen, do you mind just going over the conversation that we had and where we stand?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. So do you mean this, particularly the conversation with Amy?
Yeah.
So Needham Community Ed is planning this unbelievable program. I think she said it was going to be a 3 or 4 night commitment that people could sign up for. They're bringing in, I wanted to see if I have the person's name written down here, but Josh Frank. I'm not sure where he's a professor from, but I can put that in the notes. Anyway, he's going to do a 4-night course starting in the fall, and they're going to have, he's going to basically be breaking down kind of bit by bit what critical race theory is. I think she said that they are expecting that there's going to be up to 50 people who can sign up for each session. And they've really done all the planning. She was reaching out to different community groups to kind of get everybody's support for it, meaning like to help promote the class. So it sounds like it's going to be a really substantive deep dive into it. So I'm very excited about it. I think she said that they had already started working with Needham Diversity Initiative, the League of Women Voters. And I'm sorry, I think she said something recently that said that they were going to reach out to a couple other groups with the idea of trying to tap as many community organizations as possible to tell everybody about it and encourage people to show up. So it sounds like it's going to be a really exciting event or series of events. And being promoted, I think, through the community ed brings us a whole different audience, I think, than usually comes. So I think it'll be really exciting. And do you want me to talk about a meeting with Terry Duggan from schools?
Yes, but also you and I had also followed up because their event is not happening until the fall. You and I had discussed maybe doing a couple of maybe 1 or 2 ramp up events to get us to that, not only to help promote, but also involve other folks from Needham who may not be able to attend, for example, or may not be aware of that programming. So the 3 of us need to solidify what that ramp up event may be. And I think also, we had also discussed that, for the sake of timing, we weren't necessarily sure we wanted to wait that long to be involved with something, right?
Yes.
So I think Bud, Jen and I had discussed coming up with another event that would complement what that 4-part series is going to be, but sometime before that series, just so that we have some consistency and we're developing our own educational program in conjunction with what Amy Goldman is proposing.
Yes. And drawing a blank on her name, but there was a woman from the First Parish who said that their organization was also working on trying to put together some kind of education event on critical race theory, and they were interested in collaborating with us on that as well, which could be I know that they have a lot of people who they have a good following and a good track record of getting people to the events. So I think it could be a really good partnership for us on this. One of the things that we had talked about, I think it was as a whole committee, was talking kind of big picture, what critical race theory is, what it's not. And then we talked about maybe thinking about talking to or bringing in a part of it from the Needham Public Schools perspective. I met last week with, I think her name is Terry Duggan, who is one of the assistant superintendents. And we had a really interesting conversation that, I'll be honest with you, gave me a little bit of pause on kind of the direction of the program that we wanted to do. What she had talked about, or talked a lot about, was what there, I wanted to look for the exact term that she used. The way that they are addressing equity within the curriculum is under an umbrella of what they're calling culturally responsive teaching. And she talked about what that looks like, how they are, how it kind of tackles the substantive curriculum choices that the teachers are making, but also the way that they interact with each other and the students, and what that does to create community within the public schools. One of the things that I took away from my conversation with her was that she was very careful to say it is not critical race theory, which we know it's not critical race theory. But I sensed that maybe she was a little bit afraid of tying what they are doing into that term, since it has such a loaded meaning. And I think her point is somewhat well taken, considering some of the things that are coming up in some neighboring communities, that maybe, I'm not sure how to say this, maybe our interests are best served by keeping the two separate, so that maybe that helps people to understand it differently and prevent people from associating it with what's going on in the Needham Public Schools. But I would love to hear what you all think about that.
What was she calling it again? What was her?
Culturally responsive curriculum and teaching.
I've never heard of that.
So it's all over the, I can't think of what DESE stands for. Department of
Elementary education. Yeah.
I think it's part of like the state curriculum, and I'm not the right person to talk about this. Obviously, I don't have a very deep knowledge of it, but I think that it is part of kind of what the state has put out there as kind of best practices for creating a better environment and being more inclusive with curriculum, and also responding better to each other, students and teachers. And what she talked about was, she's like, it was age appropriate curriculum. I think in some other places we've heard it called like a quote racial literacy curriculum. I think that they've used that term to talk about what's happening in some of the elementary schools, but it is something that, from what I understand, is happening across the district, and kind of starting with the teachers to think about encouraging them to think about their own identities, the identities of the students that they're teaching and interacting with, and how that impacts what they teach and how they teach it. I think it's kind of a really bad summary of it. And one of the points that she made a couple of times was that it was not like a standalone unit that is being taught at the schools, but it was something that they were intentionally incorporating into, every piece of their kind of philosophy about how and what to teach. And she talked about the, an example of the impact that it had were those the students who came to the school committee last year with the proposal to change the name of Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, like that, how that was an example of this culturally responsive teaching in action, like that these students felt empowered and knew how to take action on something that that was important to them about that.
Emmy and Finn, I'm curious to get your perspective on this. Is this something that you are both experiencing? Is it subtly making its way into your classrooms, or is it outright, this is what we're doing, and this is how it's being incorporated into your lesson plans? Emmy?
It's interesting to hear about this because I remember like last year a lot more. There was more attempts of teachers having like sort of like those uncomfortable conversations with students. But it was definitely felt like a direct response to what was happening outside of school and like in our country. And then this year, there's really not that much of it being like contributed to our curriculum. I think this like it could be more with teachers, like behind the scenes. I know that there's probably like meetings with staff, like it could be that like that training of sort of how to talk to your students, how to incorporate this into curriculum. But I think it's definitely certain teachers, because like, you're not going to hear about this in math class or like science or something. So I think it's like English teachers, or it's like the principal and the vice principals sort of talking about it more.
Finn?
Kind of piggybacking off what Emmy said, it definitely was more present last year with like kind of right after the BLM protests, and then when Stop Asian Hate became a thing, it definitely was brought up then. But I think now it's definitely dwindled out, and every so often they bring it up, but I feel as though it should be talked about more because it's like a current issue. Like I remember last year we had a conversation with these seniors that took a course called Courageous Conversations About Race, and that was like very interesting. I feel like we haven't had anything like that since. Like they tried to do something on our half day a couple weeks ago called One Day, and that was kind of shut down about like embracing like your culture. And I don't know, I feel like there could be like more attempts to include, like Emily said, like these conversations that are kind of hard to talk about with students, because I think it will make more students aware, and I think it'll be interesting to talk about.
So neither of you feel like there's been intentional conversations this year?
No.
That's interesting.
Emmy?
I will add that I think with the older grades, there's more opportunity to have those conversations. And I think those are the kids that are more aware of it, just because I don't know, I guess that there's, whether it's like they're viewed as sort of more mature, able to handle those conversations, but we don't have really the option, like as a sophomore, I don't have the option to take those classes. There's definitely like a certain pathway that I have to follow until my senior year. And that's when it kind of opens up to take classes that you're really interested in like courageous conversations on race. But unless you're in a club of some sort, but even clubs are like, they've kind of died out a little through COVID. So it's difficult to find places to have those conversations.
But
Maybe I'm old school, but do you have homeroom? I mean, do you have a time where you're with, your peers, and would that be a place that some of these conversations could take place, Tim or Emma, as opposed to just a class?
Finn,
Yes, I think in home they've tried to attempt to bring those up. I mean, our one day, half day, like activities were definitely based in homeroom, but even that, it was pretty small. I mean, I know from my homeroom is like, we just kind of sit in silence for 10 minutes and then we go to our next class. And I think there could be a little bit more community building around these conversations. And there's, like Emmy said, in younger grades, like freshmen and sophomores, I don't think there's a lot of opportunities besides clubs, which are also, like Emmy said, have died out mostly with COVID. I think it's hard to find a way to talk to anyone or teachers or peers about this with teacher supervision.
Jen, did she mention anything about maybe making this a more formalized part of the curriculum instead of cherry picking certain teachers, classes, clubs, certain people incorporating it, certain people not incorporating it for whatever reason?
No, I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine that the feedback that Emmy and Finn are giving is something she hasn't heard before, but I got the impression that what she was saying was that the intention was for it to be exactly opposite of that, like that it was supposed to try to prevent it from being the responsibility of certain teachers in certain classes to incorporate these discussions. So I don't know, it's a really interesting, that's a really interesting conundrum, because clearly the way she sees it as being rolling out is not necessarily the way the students are feeling it.
But
Would it make sense for us to invite her to our next meeting to just have a discussion about this? I mean, I don't want to get confrontational, but I think we on our committee need to know what's going on and hopefully might have some influence as to what's taking place along with the students that are part of our group.
We did talk a little bit about, because she said there was another real coalition meeting coming up soon. I haven't seen anything about it, but I might be off the list. I don't know. And she did suggest reaching out to Diane Simmons, who is like the chair of the community engagement working group of that coalition, which I just quite frankly haven't had time to do yet. But I mean, I think that it would be, we haven't had any kind of community forum on the race equity work or any equity work going on in the schools for quite a while now, at least before the pandemic. So, I mean, I think it would definitely be something worth pursuing. Remember we did that forum a couple of years ago?
Yes.
It may be something that they would be interested in doing. I think the main message I took away from the conversation was that she didn't want it necessarily tied to an event on critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
Not that she was opposed to sharing with the community what is going on.
Cynthia.
Yeah. Jen, I like the idea or the direction that you were thinking of. Again, this is trying to see the role of the Human Rights Committee as supporting race equity work. And I was thinking the Real Coalition saw us as being in that community connection part. And by raising those questions as we're thinking about doing community education things, I think we're really doing exactly what we're supposed to do about thinking about how to connect the work of the school with the community more, whether it's hearing student voices or parents or people in general. And we know how devoted they were to having that forum happen a few years ago. And they got stuck in this conundrum of wanting to convey what they were doing and also have a chance to hear back from people. And I know, for instance, with the conversations with the police that we'll be hearing about soon, that there are at least 3 sessions, and probably was impossible to do what they wanted to do during that time. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to work with them on that. The other thing is, I can really understand where they're coming from about wanting to get a broader base in their approach to bringing about change in the direction of racial equity. That curriculum is one part of it, but if you focus on that part right now, where that's such a divisive issue, that to have the broader one about the goal of all of that, and that education about history and the curriculum is one part of that, but to have the larger picture of what they're trying to do, to me, makes sense as a way to go. But I think we could, by inviting them, and I'm not sure when would be the right time, that I would trust you and the folks who are involved with talking over this program to come up with when would be a good time to invite them to come here.
We can, Jen, Bud and I, we can meet again to hammer it out. I mean, maybe that could be not necessarily be the launching pad, since Amy is putting together the continuing ed program on critical race theory. They don't have to be hand in hand, but it could be a portion of overall teaching equity within the school system, right? And maybe that's our event. Maybe that's our educational piece for the community. Bud?
Just have a question. In the past, the superintendent has, over the years, but not in a while, attended our meetings. Is there a reason that he no longer comes to the meetings?
I don't have an answer.
I think the poor man is just
Too busy.
With trying to think
Okay.
about what, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not being critical. I'm just asking the question because, he came quite often in the past.
I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I feel like he stopped coming right around the time that COVID hit.
Yes, I don't think we're off his list. I just think it's not possible right now. And some of the other people you've been talking with, that's more within their daily job, where he has survival things with.
Everyone working in education is at capacity right now.
Does anybody else have any other comments or questions? I mean, Finn, thank you for that feedback. So
That was really
Jen,
helpful.
Bud and I we'll circle back and try to figure out moving this forward.
Do either or both of you want to join us in having that discussion, since you bring such an important perspective to the conversation?
Yeah, I would be open to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So we'll figure out, I'll organize in time and we'll figure something out. Okay, thank you guys. The community conversations on race, the policing event that's coming up, we just came off of tonight. We had another planning session. The first meeting is going to be on March 1st, correct?
Mhm.
The registration information is on the agenda, and it's it's being disseminated throughout various different channels. So I'm hoping that everybody is able to attend. We've gotten some feedback on this already. One of the challenges is COVID and not having a remote attendance option.
Right.
And I do want to say, first of all, that some of the comments that we have received have made it seem like it was intentionally exclusionary, and that is not the case. There was a lot of thought that went into the way that we plan this. And from my perspective, and I talked about this at our meeting earlier tonight, having something fully remote is also can be considered exclusionary because internet access is expensive. Having computers are expensive. Smartphones are expensive. So I think either way you cut it, it's not an easy landscape to navigate. The reason why we are doing this in person is because I think to have these conversations face to face, particularly because it is a difficult topic and it can be a challenging topic and not an easy one to have. Our feeling was it will generate much more thoughtful and honest dialogue. It's kind of easy to hide behind a computer screen. It's easy to turn your camera off. It's easy to mute yourself through technology. So we really feel like because of the topic and the sensitivity around it, it's important for us to be able to have these one-on-one conversations with people coming from varying sides of the table. Jen, Katie, do you guys have anything else you want to? I just wanted to address that specifically because I know some of you guys were on the email trail that's been being sent around. But do either of you have anything else you want to add with regards to that particular piece of it? Amelia?
I was getting a slew of emails as well and telephone conversations, and thank you for providing a rationale for having the in-person. The question I have, and I feel I'm in that category of feeling very vulnerable being in a room that is not well prepared for large group settings. And I'm wondering if the center at the Heights, we've had meetings in the room, in their main room. And if it's a big crowd, and I hope it is, I really hope this is successful and we have a wonderful turnout. I'm wondering about the room itself and why that, if people thought about how the attendees could be protected, the ventilation, the spacing. Will they limit number of people in that room? I mean, what precautions have been taken to make people feel comfortable in attending?
Katie?
So I'll say our first choice was Powers Hall and it wasn't available, which is kind of our biggest space to be able to do it in. And so I'm going to just speak for the March 1st event because the second and third sessions, are still evolving. So just for this first one. So at the Center at the Heights, there will be some spacing between chairs, but I want to give an honest expectation. It's not going to be a lot of distance between them, but they won't be touching. And we have 30 RSVPs right now. So it's nowhere near the room capacity. If it starts getting closer, I'll have to bring that to the planning committee and see if we want to do a cap, but we just haven't come close to that yet. I'll also just say right now, masks are required at the CAF for all programs, all events. Cynthia, before you clap too much, I will say the Board of Health is actively discussing that mandate, and so it is in place right now. I have no idea if anything will change on the Board of Health regulations between now and then. So I just want to be honest about that.
Will people be asked to provide evidence of vaccination?
No.
But
Just wondering, any other place in town, a house of worship with a big hall, Babson College? I mean, there are, I'm sure, places that have larger facilities that if we were concerned about safety and distancing, that those should be taken into consideration.
I don't have kind of a list of places that we've checked, but there's no perfect answer to this.
Cynthia, did you have
Yeah,
something you wanted to ask or a comment?
yeah, I appreciate the dilemma and the desire. We all want to have for face-to-face conversation, but the reality is that some of us will be putting ourselves at risk by going into situations. And when I signed up for it at Center at the Heights, I was assuming that the mask policy was happening because that's a vulnerable population there. And I have to be honest, I'm in that group. I don't define myself that way, but I have to be realistic. And I have a granddaughter who can't be vaccinated yet, et cetera. Everybody has different situations. And it just feels strange to say we're going to do it because we want to have face-to-face. We all want to have face-to-face, but we've been limited by the realities. And I understand that the Board of Health may be making decisions that are different, but that's still out there. CDC says, yes, open these things up, except for these populations. And I understand that having things virtual excludes people too, but just when I signed up for it, I was assuming that at least the masks were there and maybe I could go sit in a corner or something. I know.
So
It's tough.
the first, as Katie said, we're exploring logistics for the second and third event. This first event will be recorded. Another issue is that hybrid is a mess. I mean, I think it just won't, I know some of you who have attended hybrid events and the technology behind it, when you have 30 minutes and we have a slew of presenters that night, would be very difficult to navigate. So if in a perfect world we could create a hybrid event, absolutely we could, but we would. But the technology is just not going to allow for that in order for us to have a successful and seamless event. So this first event will be recorded and it's primarily presentation based. Going through the history of policing in Needham, in America, and the current state of policing in Needham now by the chief. And then I believe at the end, we'll be collecting questions and answers. And I don't remember, did we decide that we're also going to continue with collecting feedback or questions for the future sessions? Wasn't that something that we had talked about?
Yes. And the session's gonna be recorded and air on the Needham channel. So anyone, it won't be a live participation option, but anyone can watch that session afterwards on the Needham channel and can send questions in through email or the RSVP registration link for sessions 2 and 3. So there'll be some feedback loop.
But
is an effort being made, those who have been circulating these emails about not having it remote, of having that list to make sure that those people know that it's going to be recorded, know that it's going to be on the Needham channel? I think it's important to reach out to the community and those that have those concerns to, give them every reason to be able to participate, at least to be able to watch the recording.
yeah, well, sorry, Katie.
No, I was gonna say I've related to everyone that I'm in contact with, but I don't know if there are other chains out there that I'm not on. So please feel free to echo it to anyone that you're talking with. Yep.
Amelia.
I think in sending out the publicity that might be mentioned. So when you send the flyer, NDI just shared a flyer that we're going to be promoting. And maybe having something, if you're doing an email list or putting something on a Facebook page, you might also indicate that and provide that information. That there will be recorded and that there would be a possibility to submit questions. And hopefully that, I mean, I would feel more comfortable in Powers Hall if the second and third dates are could possibly be held there. I mean, and I think more people would feel comfortable with that. And also, another question I was asked, and I wasn't sure about it. Who is sponsoring this? Is it the Human Rights Committee? Are there others that are is there a planning committee or are there sponsors?
I think the planning committee participants were listed in the most recent marketing material. Is that correct, Katie?
Yes.
So members from HRC, which are myself and Jen, members from town government, town hall, the town manager's office, Kate Fitzpatrick and Katie, select board members, Marianne Cooley, Marcus Nelson, Joanne Allen Willoughby from Metco and the school system, and Ramin. Am I missing anybody?
Chief Slittler. Kate Ward
So-
from NDI.
Yeah. Right. I forgot about Kate. So it's a collaborative, it's been a collaborative event, effort from all different groups. Cynthia.
One of the problems is I think we've been hearing about this all the time. So I feel really comfortable about, that the Human Rights Committee has representatives on the planning group and that we as a body are supporting and sponsoring. Some of the other groups have not had that close a connection with it. So there was a little bit of a shock when they saw that, people at NDI saw their names. And I remember going to Ramin and said, well, what does this mean? And I don't know that he realized he should have been every month letting them know what was going on and helping them to feel part of it. Or so I think somebody used the word sponsor, and then later the more recent ones have said supporters, which is, I think, a good way of doing it. So that there isn't this, that people are having to vet everything along the way, which makes it impossible.
It makes it impossible. And I do have to say that, poor Ramin, he took the brunt of a lot of what's been going on this week. We're not going to make everybody happy, right? It's not going to be the perfect event, regardless of how long we've been trying to plan this out. And B, there are just some voices that there's a certain spin that they want us to put on this event. And we are trying to show all different sides of policing. That is, we're trying to be as equitable as possible in putting together this programming. So some people are not going to be happy. And I don't really know how to respond to those types of criticisms where people are looking for an event that will basically just criticize the Needham PD or policing in general without, having other perspectives being presented. I don't think it's fair.
I think you just have to not respond. And I think you have to accept the fact that you're not going to please everybody. And that's just the way it is. I mean, it is.
I think just to add to that, this committee I mean, I think we started planning this last summer.
Yeah.
I think
It's
is
been a
when we
long time.
started to meet. And so I think that it's fair to say that the committee had lots of different perspectives and dug into some really into the weeds on a lot of different things. And I think that probably nobody got the event that maybe they thought they wanted, but I think that we came to consensus about what kind of event we could produce that would have the best possibility of bringing people into this conversation who otherwise don't come to the events that we usually hold because they maybe feel not a part of that conversation, or that they anticipate what the conversation is going to be because of the way the conversation is framed. And so I feel like that one of the primary goals of everybody working on that committee was how can we get more than just the usual people that show up to our events to be part of this conversation. And so I think that, you know, it definitely falls, it's definitely not necessarily the not the conversation that everybody wanted to have, but I think it's a good example of a community collaboration in that it you know, it's like any kind of mediation. Nobody walks away feeling like they got everything that they wanted, and nobody feels like they lost everything that was important to them. I think it really was a pretty consensus, an agenda built on consensus. Again, kind of with the goal of bringing more people into the conversation, more than trying to tackle a particular lens or issue related to it. I think of it as the baby steps that Cynthia's been talking to us about for years now, in terms of getting people to the table.
Thank you. And all the people who have really dug into it. I have heard from some people about that. And it's the dream we had. If we're going to do anything, we need to take the difficult issues and really work. Thank you.
I think the other thing that I just want to note is that all of our meetings are public and recorded as well. So I know that people feel like this came out of nowhere. And it's not that I expect that everybody's like sitting down watching, you know, the Zoom meetings every night, but it's not like this was something that was being baked in secret. This was very out in the world for people to comment along the way.
Does anybody have any other comments or questions? And we're going to keep talking about it. I mean, as we mentioned, this is, you know, the first event is pretty much in the books on March 1st. But we still have time to, the other two events are evolving. So we still have time to, and who knows, you know, after March 1st, things may change depending on the conversation or perspectives. So, you know, give us your feedback and let us know what you think as we move through this. Okay. How much time do we have left? 15 minutes. Renaz, I'm going to skip over the discrimination complaint process piece right now because that I think is going to take a little bit of time, and Marlene's not here. So I may couch that for the next meeting. Renaz wanted some time to talk about her thoughts for International Day. Renaz, do you want to?
Yes, I'm going to
start. Ideas?
Yeah. I put down something. When I was working overseas as a school teacher in a private school, I used to plan the International Day event with the PTO. We usually had 80 booths representing Italy, England, Japan. People will walk around and watch the displays, listen to the music and try different food, learn about specific holidays and so on. These booths were designed by the students and their families. Back in Dubai, my daughter used to pack her yummy Syrian grape leaves and will try the sushi her Japanese friend brings. Lunch was like an international buffet. Then we moved to a small town in Connecticut. where people looked the same. When my daughter took her grape leaves to school, kids made fun of her and they said her food smells bad. So she asked me for the following 3 years to pack her Lunchables. They're unedible. Then we moved to Needham, and people looked different from the small town in Connecticut. There was more diversity in the community. I was waiting to become a citizen to be involved in a social group and start an initiative here in Needham. Since I moved here, I made so many friends in Needham from India, Pakistan, different countries from the Middle East like Egypt and Lebanon and Israel. Last month, I reached out to one of the school select board members unofficially. She is a dear friend, her name is Leslie, and asked her about her opinion about such an idea on either a school level or a town level. She welcomed the idea and started also unofficially suggesting names as to who are the right people to reach out to. I also reached out again unofficially to Beth Penals and Nicole Argo, asking them about their opinion, and they were thrilled and excited about the idea. While I was putting a plan and gathering information about how to execute my idea, my daughter came from the high school complaining about the survey that was sent by the school. The survey was about the country of origin. Then they were planning to put the students based on their answers together. Like, for example, if you answered the country of origin is Italy, then they will put you with all the students who picked that country. My daughter reached out to groups in Needham High School, and they wrote a letter to the administration complaining about the survey and the one-day theme. I'm going to read you just some parts of the letter, just so you know what are the ideas of the students. That's what they said. In receiving the initial email and filling out the survey, many students were left confused, anxious, unheard, and angry. Why were we being forced to choose between multiple countries of origin? Why were we being divided by countries of origin for a day that is intended to strengthen our community and connect us with people outside our circle? Why did a large portion of Needham High School faculty seem unaware of the red flags this raised for us students? To begin, country of origin is not an adequate identifier of every student in Needham High, and it disregards the complex identities many students hold. Many multicultural or multiracial students cannot easily select one country. Then it keeps going. As a person in an adoptive family, one of the girls wrote, not only are activities that presuppose I understand my heritage, in the biological sense, isolating, but have also the unfortunate consequences of emphasizing the conventions that stigmatize my adoptive family. Then keeps going, it doesn't take into account that some people who come from marginalized backgrounds have trauma and complicated relationships with their country of origin, nationality, immigration, enslavement, while country of origin could have been thought to be politically correct way of opening dialogue on students' cultural backgrounds, it remains a loaded term. Not every Needham High School student can reflect upon their country of origin without having to consider racial, historical, or familial trauma, and asking every student to do so puts an unfair weight on those very students. Then, as one of the students said, as a student of color, this survey has caused me so much anxiety and stress. I feel as though grouping us with other students with the same experience further divides us and segregates us rather than unites us. I feel like this activity could have been executed better if we had conversation in our classes rather than singling students out and causing them to pick and choose between certain aspects of their identity. It keeps going a lot, but because we don't have so much time, and the letter was signed by the Asian Students Union, Black Student Union, Korean Student Union, and many other unions. The administration read this letter and promptly sent an email to the school stating one day will continue without the division of the students into rooms based on their countries. This made me stop and reconsider the idea of International Day. Maybe it shouldn't be on a school level. Maybe it should be a town thing and people would choose to participate, or maybe not do it at all. Because I'm sure the intention of the administration of the school was to show a diverse community within Needham High School, which they ended up counting 120 country of origin. But I don't know, what do you think? If we make it a town event, where you voluntarily sign up to run a booth and participate, and not a forced event like at Needham High, where one day is a mandatory event for students, then people would feel more inclined to share their cultures. What do you think?
I mean,
So Finn and I have definitely heard about this like one day fiasco that went on. Basically in homeroom, we had like an extended homeroom and they gave us this survey. And the questions were like, where are your parents from? Where are you, like, where do you say you're from? Do you know the story of how your family came to be in America? I'm like, for every single one, I kind of just said America because I mean, like, I have a white mom, black dad, and I'm from like 20 different countries. Like, I've taken a DNA test. Like, there wasn't one place that I could say besides America, because for me, like, that's what it is. But it was definitely, I didn't even know that there was this letter sent. So that's interesting to hear about. But I knew, I'd heard that they were going to like segregate us. And I was like, what? Isn't this weird? Like, why are they doing this? So it was really confusing. But my advice is that it should be like a voluntary thing, because I think it's way more engaging for people to want to share about where they're from rather than feeling like pressured to say where they're from.
Finn?
Once again, kind of adding on to Emmy, even with the adjustment to it, putting it in homerooms, it was definitely a silent survey, and I know many people did not complete it because the questions kind of got into stuff like pop culture and government and your country of origin, which even if you put something like Ireland or Italy, some people who have been in America and parents have been in America don't really know that. And I think it just, we usually do this around a book every summer, but our book was canceled this year. And I think with students, it's kind of hard to engage into something like this where maybe it's a little uncomfortable with, like you said, with the racial and family trauma. I think it, like Emmy said, being more voluntary could be a little bit more beneficial and get more input from everyone in the town.
I mean, that type of thing is uncomfortable for adults. That drives me crazy when people ask me where I'm from. I mean, it's loaded, right? So I don't understand. I don't understand what that was. They were
Yeah,
doing
I think someone didn't think before they,
through
sorry
that
for
at
not
all.
raising my.
Cynthia.
Hey, wow. I know people meant well, but that's really, really, I feel sad for the people who wanted to do something, and more sad for the people who were in such a difficult place. Coming back though to the idea of international kind of celebrations, a place nearby that's done that kind of thing is in Wellesley. I don't know if they've done it, during the pandemic, but it was an adult sponsored kind of thing, and a lot of families came, and so they would find people. For instance, I know the Indian group of Needham puts on cultural things. So that's a group that identifies, or some of them do, as that's culture, and they want to share it, whether people are from that country or wherever they're from, that's a culture. And so there were booths all around. It might have been like one of the schools or Wellesley College even, and there were events all day long. And so groups that wanted to do something reflecting a particular country or culture could set them up. Like the Chinese Friends of Needham has their Lunar New Year celebration. I don't know if they had it this year. And they really publicize it more afterwards because they're trying to provide a place of affirmation of cultural background for people of Chinese descent. And I've been a couple of times, and it's absolutely wonderful, and they do welcome some outsiders. But so there are groups in Needham that already exist to kind of affirm and share their culture, who could do that kind of thing. And then everybody can benefit from that learning without putting anybody on the spot and so many people have so many varied backgrounds and trauma connected sometimes. But it also requires an incredible amount, well, you've put it together, energy. I think years ago, that there was like once a month in Needham, and I don't know if it came from the Human Rights Committee, like there was a get to know your neighbors from Japan, or get to know, so that instead of trying to do a gigantic thing all at once, so maybe if there were a group of people, you've already talked to a couple, who could come up with what would be a way that would be comfortable for the people doing the presenting, and what would be a way that would be doable in terms of the resources. And we're still on the cusp of hoping to be able to do more things in person. But those are just my thoughts.
Amelia?
I like Renaz's idea of sharing uniqueness of the diversity within the community. And maybe nationality is not the way we want to go, or culture, but maybe if we use a different variable, family traditions, or somehow highlighting families. And that could include cultural traditions. It could include other things, different types of families. But you might still touch upon the diversity, the many layers of diversity that exist, and how we can celebrate that and see it in a dignified, respectful way. And I think this is something that would have to be carefully planned with people who are diverse, not just white, but people from diverse backgrounds.
Bud?
I like the idea, and I think it's something that is a major project. So, it's not going to happen, in a month or 2 months. It's something that we should be considering, for the future, as to how we would get involved and how we would be supportive of something like this.
Thank you. So to me, it was just like an educational thing. The more you know, the less hate you have, right? So, your neighbor, if they celebrate specific occasion, or like the Chinese New Year, or the Indian, they have the Diwali, and all things that I learned about through doing this international day. Maybe the name is wrong. Maybe I was thinking, because we're all Americans, but we all eat differently, right? Based on where we come from, and we have different backgrounds. The whole intent was just an educational intent in a fun environment, just show different cultures, how we live together peacefully. But what it triggered in the high school made me I need to take it slowly. I have a list of names who I'm going to reach out to, but I wanted to ask your opinion before I do it or start such a huge project.
Bud?
I think it's very important for our committee to hear about these things. I mean, if you had not brought this to our attention tonight, we wouldn't have known that this took place. And it's really important for us to know what's going on in the community, and also how we should react to these things, or hopefully do everything we can in our power to make sure that they don't happen again, even though the intentions might have been good.
Honestly, I think the intention of the school, I was like, oh my God, thank God they started before I started, because that was my intention. But it turned out really bad. And the first one who didn't like it was my daughter. She said, no, I don't want to be forced to sit with the Syrian group. So with the Syrian students, what I'm going to take from them? I want to be sitting with the group and learn from their cultures. They learn from my culture, but then the other kids, they didn't feel the same, right? And people who left their country because of war, they don't feel like they have such a trauma, or, many other like adopted kids, different. I should think about it, like consider all the consequences.
Well, we appreciate you bringing the idea to the committee. Let's continue to vet it. If you and I you want more to discuss it in depth further, I'm happy to talk to you about that. If anybody else is interested in helping Renaz sort this out, shoot me an email and we can try to figure out a time to meet. Thank you, Renaz. It's a little after 9, so everything else will bump to March. The one thing that we do need to quickly discuss is the annual report. What's the deadline, Katie?
I actually just asked if it could be moved. So March
When was the
4th,
deadline?
so it's 2 weeks.
No.
If I don't know who has put it together in the past, but
So I vaguely remember last year, everybody took a piece of it. Is that correct?
And I think Jen pulled it together. Do I remember right? Somebody pulled it together.
I feel like, was it Amelia? Or Amelia gave us the bones to fill in, I think.
Amelia, been doing it for years.
Yes, and I decided not to 2 years ago. But there is a model which I could distribute. It's just, and we could just fill in the blanks. The first part of it, you just repeat. It's our charge and our mission statements. It's a matter of filling in the events what we did, what our role was throughout the last fiscal year in terms of connecting to the community. So events, initiatives that we took, etc.
Okay, so could you send that to me? Could I just first ask, is there anybody that is not able or willing to contribute something to this?
If everyone takes a piece of it, for example, if you were at the diversity summit, you write a very short paragraph, what happened at the diversity summit. And there's already a framework on the previous annual reports. So if everyone will take something, the book discussion, if you were part of that, or whatever, MLK Day celebration.
At my neighbor's table, all of that. So if you could.
Somebody has to put it all together.
Okay, so could you send me just the template and I'll, I don't know, what's the easiest way to do this? Because I'm sure if I come up with a list of things, I'm going to be missing some stuff. So basically, we just need a list of what happened last year, and then everybody needs to take a section, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you begin by sending a list and we can all add to it and then select a piece, one item. I mean, then we might not all have to do it, but.
Okay. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah. And Katie, did you say there might be a later deadline than the 4th? That sounds really hard, just coordination wise.
There's no way. Really hard. I'm telling you right now, that's not happening. We need an extension.
I'm not in charge of it, so I'll circle back and see what,
The minutes might be a good template too. I mean, the activities are going to be listed there.
Also photos, if anyone has any photos, we could get some, I could get some from Needham. Raman always takes good, although we haven't done anything in person. In the past, we've actually included photos. I don't know how we're going to do that. Maybe just the poster, the flyer.
A lot of town groups don't have photos, so I think we could save ourselves sometime.
Okay, so I'll circulate that list and we'll organize. And then Katie, if you could get back to us with a reasonable deadline, that would be great.
Katie, did you take a screenshot one time of the,
Last year we did.
so maybe that's another thing you can do if, with everybody's permission, just take a screenshot and that's the photo, the group photo.
You want one right now?
Sure.
Here
go
we
for
are.
it. Go for it.
Okay, the scale from last year was, I'm going to count down, but everyone has to actually look at the camera on their phone. Don't look at
Right.
yourself. I mean, look at the camera on your computer. Hold on. All right, 3, 2, 1. Let me. We're good.
Good, great. Announcements, you guys check the agenda. There are a couple of things. And as I said, the other things that we're going to push to March, I think it's okay. Thank you. This was a very loaded meeting. Oh, yeah, Cynthia.
I'm not sure it got out to people, but the Needham Housing listening session, the next one is March 24th. And I know we'll have another meeting before that, but just if people miss that first one, you can listen to the recording that was sent out and you can ask questions in advance. And it was really, really worth going to. So hopefully more people can get to it next time. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Tina.
Yeah.
Cynthia, what did you call it again? The Needham Housing Forum?
It's the list, what's the housing?
It was the same night as,
Housing Plan Working Group listening session.
it was the same night as the book discussion.
Right, so that's why, but it's recorded so people can see that. And the next one, the 24th, as far as I know, we don't have anything planned then. So hopefully that will work for more people. Thanks.
Okay.
I move for adjournment. Is that what you want, Tina, next?
Yeah, but I just want to quickly,
Okay.
Finn and Emmy, I'm going to follow up with you guys on the email I sent you a couple days ago. Okay. Okay. Yes, please.
I move that we adjourn.
Second. Anybody? Does anybody want to second that motion?
Second.
Cynthia,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Amelia,
Yes.
Renaz,
Yes.
Finn,
Yes.
Bud,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Emmy,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Thank you, guys. Have a good
Thank you,
vacation week.
Tina.
Yeah.
All the best to Julie.